Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Recent research reports that the North American Internet data center market will total $23 billion by 2012, a 3-year compounded annual growth rate of 20%. High-performance connectivity, premium co-location and hosting infrastructure, and best-in-class customer support is what it takes to create a unique value proposition to keep customers and win over new prospects. Greetings, everyone. It's Friday, October 26, 2012, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. Up to the connectivity to optimize IP traffic and the best performance over the Internet, not to mention this edition of Tech Talk, the data center of tomorrow, today. From the hottest technologies of the moment to managing complicated legacy systems, bare metal clouds, to why virtualization should or should not matter to you, and more, much more. Tech Talk Data Center and you, Tech Talk Big Business, Tech Talk Data Center Leadership, and you turn to Internap as we speak with company's Senior Vice President, Product Development, Josh Crowe. Josh leads the product development and business development functions across the complete portfolio of Internap solutions. He's a seasoned executive with extensive experience in the areas of cloud computing, managed hosting, and network services. His leadership teams in the creation, evaluation, and execution of Internap's long-term profitable growth strategy. Jim was formerly Internap's Senior Vice President of Product Engineering. Prior, he was with Savvis as Vice President, Global Software Development. In progressively senior positions during his 6 years with the company, Jim was responsible for product management, product engineering, and software development. He and his teams released the company's first cloud computing products, leading to CenturyLink's $2.5 billion acquisition of Savvis in July of 2011. He has served as Regional Vice President at Caliance and led systems engineering teams for Cisco Systems and served as a CIO at Noble & Associates. The big business future for big data centers and what you should know just what to look for in an exploding cloud of technological advancements as the Tech Talk optimizes connectivity with industry leader and Senior Vice President for Internap, Josh Crowe. Josh, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, Internap, you hear an awful lot about the exciting things that you guys are doing, but I certainly know that the vertical that you're involved in has got to be one of the hottest. Let's talk a little bit about cloud services and potentially the hype technology areas at the moment. You say that, to the contrary, to popular belief, clouds isn't always the most economical option for organizations. Maybe give our listeners a little explanation about that.
Sure, not a problem. So when you think about what cloud does for customers, it's really about providing on-demand services from pooled resources for customers to find a new home for their a new infrastructure home for their applications. And most organizations have a fairly broad mix of applications. They have applications that are scale-out web applications. They have legacy applications, and all those different needs usually translate to different solutions. And so, when you get into a public cloud environment, they tend to be relatively expensive for steady-state applications. So for an application that a customer has that has fairly fixed workload and has fairly fixed user base and pretty well-known demand, a lot of times not always the best fit. So a lot of times an organization will need a varying set of infrastructures to satisfy those different needs, whether that be, maybe they want to put some of their legacy applications in a co-location data center. Maybe they want to put some of their applications onto a managed hosting or a private cloud, or maybe they want to be in a very bursty public cloud environment where they can turn infrastructure up and down really quickly. So.
Now, is that something that you usually advise them as to what their options and alternatives are, or do they actually come out looking, or a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. We frequently run into customers who have all the needs across the spectrum, or they have one new application, one new problem to solve, and they come to us with some thought, certainly based on their research about whether this is an opportunity for them to move into a private cloud, whether this is a fit for public cloud, and so it usually ends up that we end up consulting with them, especially for some of the larger environments.
And again, as I mentioned earlier, your feeling is that cloud isn't always the most economical option. So obviously, some of that consultation and direction is going to offset expenses when you've given them a more efficient approach.
Yeah, I mean, when Internap talks to a customer, a lot of times what we find out is that there's some level of optimization that needs to happen there. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it really comes down to, does a cloud platform like ours meet the needs of your application and what you need it to do on a regular basis, as opposed to saying, everything must go to the cloud, right? And that's not to say that cloud offerings won't get there. Certainly, Internap and others provide cloud offerings that allow you to run many of your applications in a cloud environment. So it's more a question of what's the right fit for your application so that you're running and getting what you need.
Well, and I guess as we were just saying, with all the hype, there's an aggressive posture to want to get to it, want to immediately solve my problem. I'm looking for a cloud, and I guess really the point I'm emphasizing here is that our listeners have options. Obviously, there's other suppliers, vendors, that kind of thing. But that do they always have the options, and are they willing to provide the kind of consultation and leadership that gives them the kind of direction that they actually need to come to the right conclusion at the most effective price?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think Internap does a very good job of providing customers with different platforms from which to choose for their applications, and that's not always the case. A lot of times you may run into a situation where everything, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Sure. In our approach, we feel like Internap maintains a set of offerings so that we can solve the various aspects of the problem, or the different versions of the problem that drive people to the cloud. Important
differentiator. I mean, no doubt about it. Obviously, it's, anymore when you're a small to medium-sized business, large enterprise, it doesn't make any difference. Decisions and choices are so difficult and to have a little bit of trust and some confidence in the leadership that you're not just simply being sold something, you're being advised. I think that's a huge benefit. Now, another thing, you and I have spoke before, but you don't believe that cloud equals virtualization. That obviously goes against current opinion. Give us a little bit of an explanation about that and why it doesn't matter to customers.
Sure. As a terrific example of this, if you go look at the NIST definition of what cloud computing is, you won't find in there anywhere that it says it's about virtualization. What you'll find is that it's much more about on-demand, self-service, broad network access, pooled resources that are available, potentially even in a multi-tenant fashion, elastic capacity, and measured or metered services. When you think about sort of those characteristics, nothing in there screams that it has to be virtual. Virtualization certainly helps and enables that. But for us, it's much more about Internap providing our customers with the choice between physical or virtual. So for our offerings, for our cloud offerings, you can make the choice. You can say, look, for this workload, I want it to be on physical or I want it to be on virtual. It's the same operating systems, same management platforms. It looks and feels the same. So the customer can make that choice. They can move back and forth between the two and not have the being bound into a particular offering so that they can't choose at a later date to move between physical and virtual.
Well, one of the things we talk about here often on Tech Talk is that the vernacular just doesn't keep up with the rapid change of technology. So sometimes it's kind of hard to describe something. You want to use the word pizza, and everybody knows what a pizza is, but can you really do that with virtualization, network, channels, and all of the different terminology we sometimes get locked into? Bare metal clouds, term I hear every once in a while. I know you guys use it. What are you referring to when you talk about a bare metal cloud?
Yeah, I think bare metal cloud is a great way of saying that physical cloud server, right? That server that is the same experience as you get on Internap's cloud, but not necessarily underpinned by a hypervisor or by a virtual machine manager. And so for the customer's experience, it's roughly the same thing, right? They get the same experience end to end, the difference being they get the performance characteristics or profile of having a dedicated server. But you're right, and this is certainly an emerging term. You're also hearing it called metal as a service. And even most recently, some Linux distributions coming out with some of the capabilities bundled in. So you're increasingly finding that customers are realizing and providers are becoming aware that customers need the ability to hybridize their bare metal servers and their virtual servers in the same environment. And really, the use of a hypervisor doesn't necessarily drive the customer experience.
Well, and I have to admit that I kind of was drifting into the question, and I mentioned about vernacular. You use several terms like hypervisor that I'm not sure that I'm familiar with, and I'm wondering a lot of our listeners are maybe in the same situation. It isn't so much about explaining the terminology, but rather that when you sit with a customer, do you actually go through that kind of detail? Do they get overwhelmed with the descriptions from people that are specialists? And here I sit as a generalist trying to just kind of figure the whole thing out.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, our customers definitely, there's frequently that front end of our discussions wherein we're discussing with them and getting level set on what the terminology is or what we mean by this. And they're usually, it usually ends up, you've got to take a little bit of time to build a little common language set because, as you mentioned, the terms are shifting, they're evolving. I think, probably the right way to think about cloud computing is an evolving paradigm, and anything that's evolving, there's going to be a little squishiness on the definition, right?
I even like evolving paradigm. That beats out dynamic fluidity.
There you go.
But I think it's important that unfortunately, when you're a generalist, as most, and I don't think CTOs or CIOs necessarily are, obviously, but I think in a lot of enterprises, people are trying to keep up with so much of the change, and that it's important that they have subject matter experts, disciplines that have specialty to it, that have studied the past and the present, but are already looking into the future. Because again, it's just not buying that. To use a primitive comparison, electricity by the volt. It's a level of knowledge as well as technology that's in play here. So I think it is kind of important that balance of consulting be part of the relationship, and obviously that's part of what you guys provide all the time.
I think that's right. I think we spend a lot of time with our customers explaining, or working with them to focus on what their experience is with us, not necessarily as much about what the technology is. I always jokingly say that you don't know what billing platform is running the mobile phone company billing system that you're getting your bill from. You just know you have a certain amount of service that you consume and use, and you don't care necessarily as much about what the platforms behind the scene are. And we encourage our customers to think about that, to hold us accountable for the quality of the cloud services, the infrastructure services, and the performance of them, and less about what the technology choices that go in behind the scenes are.
Old school, we used to say CEOs don't want to know how it works, we just want to know what it does, and that's getting more and more challenging when you're trying to make so many different choices. Let's talk a little bit specifically about the types of businesses that really benefit from this, and who should be considering, say, an option like bare metal clouds or some of the other things you've been talking about.
Well, I think when you think about cloud computing and infrastructure as a service, to use two phrases there, it really is an extension of the outsourcing model. It really is taking a specialized bit of technology that is a general purpose service like computing is, and saying, okay, how am I going to take that to market, or what do I really need for my applications to run? And I think for us, it's about our customers being able to leverage those services and use them from us without having to worry about what the technologies are behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm convinced anymore that relationships, they've always been important, but today more than ever, you really can't operate alone. And the more relationships that you can build with the kind of people that you can trust, somebody that that you can come to, not necessarily you don't want to look stupid, but you want to be smart and making sure you're making the right decisions with the right kind of information. And I think it is as simple as a cloud, but it may be as complicated as a cloud. And I think what you're saying is that sometimes the better choice is the organization and not necessarily the service in terms of the making sure it's the best choice for your particular company. Is there anything that you'd maybe want to bring up in terms of anything that's new or cutting edge or something that Internap is doing that maybe some of our listeners might not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, Internap has a long history as a network service provider and well known by a lot of our customers when they first get to know us and engage with us, that we've been a high performing network provider for many years and know us in that vein.
Sure.
And what they're often surprised to come out and find out, we're actually headquartered here in Atlanta and have about 500 employees total, but over half of them are here in Atlanta. They also find out that we are actually a very, very much a leading player in public clouds and private clouds and managed hosting and co-location services. So it's oftentimes a bit of an education for customers. They say, hey, you're the great network guys. Oh, wait a minute, you guys actually do all these other hosting services. So a lot of times it's almost like a reintroduction to us for a lot of our customers.
Well, and I know one thing our listeners would be familiar with, because a lot of them are TAG members, is how active you are in the Technology Association and how much some of your employees and some of your executives participate in a lot of the activities and events, and I know you're highly supportive of a lot of activities and events as well, and I'd be remiss in not bringing that up from just an overall membership organizational standpoint. I want to thank you for your support as a premier member and other things that you guys do, so many. Unfortunately, complicated subject. Maybe we'll have you back again. Not maybe. We'd love to have you back. We'd be proud to bring you back on again to talk in more detail about some of the issues that we've kind of touched upon today. But unfortunately, our time is running a little short, and I know in your case, with your busy schedule, thank you for taking time to spend a few minutes with us today on Tech Talk.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.